What's up, Airsofters? This is the all-new Cybergun FN Herstal licensed F2000 AEG. Known affectionately as the tactical Tuna, this modern ergonomic bullpup rifle has been seen in many movies like G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra and The Expendables, and in games like Battlefield 3 and Splinter Cell, just to name a few. The real FN F2000 was developed in the early 2000s using elements from the P90, like the rotating safety and trigger mechanisms, and of course the bullpup design. Moving away from the P90's 5.7 cartridge, the F2000 was chambered in 5.56 NATO, which opened up compatibility with more widely available ammunition and magazines, specifically the Stanag mag. While not a huge commercial success, the F2000 is still being used internationally by several military groups, to a small degree by international special forces units, and wider distribution in the Slovenian Army and the Saudi Arabian National Guard. Like the P90, the F2000 was designed to be completely ambidextrous, with the exception of the newly added charging handle. Breaking once again with tradition, the F2000 actually featured a patented ejection system that used a chute, pushing spent casings forward and out of this ejection port above the barrel. It's a really unique design that all but eliminated the ejection, noise, and gas issues of traditional bullpup designs. In fact, this AEG version of the F2000 is most closely related to the F2000 Tactical, which featured a top Picatinny rail as opposed to the factory-fitted 1:6X optic mounted on a rail covered with a polymer shroud as seen on the original F2000. In fact, a lot of people thought it looked like an airsoft gun or a video game gun, so I'm glad to see that we have options here for our optics. The F2000 comes in a very clearly labeled package with the description of the product as well as some useful information on the side. And opening the cover reveals the styrofoam padding in which the F2000 is placed, along with an instruction manual, a practice target, a high cap winder, and a set of Allen keys. Just underneath that, we've got some BBs thrown in for good measure, a front sight adjustment post, the high capacity magazine. Just above the magazine, we have the 9.6 volt NIMH battery. This is a 1100 milliamp, as well as a simple wall charger. One other quick note about the included keys. Besides the winding key for your magazine, there are two Allen keys here, one of which is to remove the stock cover, and the second key is for this access hole right here, which allows you to adjust the motor height from outside the gun. The Cybergun F2000 is a very tech-friendly platform. The entire barrel assembly slides off the chassis with the push of a single button, making cleaning and maintenance a breeze. The hop-up chamber is polymer with a rotary dial and is held in place with a single cross screw. You'll need a hex key to access the battery compartment underneath the butt pad. Thankfully, it's included. There's plenty of room for most popular battery types. These tabs are perfect for holding a Titan 7.4 volt brick lithium ion securely in place. The Cybergun F2000 has one of the most accessible gearboxes in Airsoft. By simply unscrewing the polymer plate underneath the butt pad, the entire gearbox can be removed without taking anything else apart. If the gearbox and hop-up look familiar to you, that's because they're straight out of an existing platform, the AUG. In fact, it even says AUG right here on the trigger. It makes a lot of sense. The AUG is an established AEG platform with aftermarket parts readily available. And that means all those available upgrades are 100% compatible with this F2000. Let's check out the stock parts. The piston is polymer with a single metal tooth. The polymer piston head is ported and has a thrust bearing to prevent spring binding. The polymer cylinder head and nozzle are AUG pattern with two O-rings on the cylinder head and none in the nozzle. The cylinder itself is notched and only fits one way in the gearbox, so you'll either need to file down that tab if you plan on putting an aftermarket cylinder, or file a notch in the cylinder, since this one is ported to be a little under-volumed for the 420mm inner barrel. The 18:1 gears ride on 7mm bushings and are spun by a ferrite magnet motor. Notice that the wires are soldered onto the motor contacts. This is great for reliability, but does make upgrading the motor a bit more of a chore. The one non-standard thing about the gearbox is the trigger setup. There are two sets of contacts, one inside the gearbox and one outside the gearbox. This allows the F2000 to have a progressive trigger, just like the AUG. The second set of trigger contacts overrides the first, meaning that in the full auto setting, you can pull the trigger just a little bit for single shots or all the way back for full auto. All things said, this gearbox system is proven, reliable, and strong enough for some really demanding builds. It's always a good thing when we see companies producing AEGs that are easily compatible with aftermarket parts and upgrades, and even better when that system is as proven and reliable as the version 3 gearbox. You know, one of the first things you notice about the bullpup design is how different it is from every other rifle setup. Both AKs, M4s, MP5s, nothing feels quite the same as a bullpup design. Having the magazine behind the trigger mechanism makes reloading easier, but it also changes your firing position a bit. And that's the first thing I noticed when shooting this. Not that it's uncomfortable, it just takes some getting used to. But let's talk about the external construction. Much like its real F2000 counterpart, the majority of the externals are polymer or nylon fiber reinforced polymer, with the upper being removable just like the real one by depressing this button here. Press that through the other side and you can slide the whole upper off of the F2000. Up top here, we've got a full metal Picatinny rail for the inclusion of optics. Of course, they've also included a fixed front sight that's adjustable for height, as well as a flip-up rear sight. It is adjustable. I didn't find myself using this all that much, and I immediately gravitated to using a red dot or any other type of optic simply because it made aiming all that much easier. The nice thing too is because of your firing position, you can get an elevated optic, and then if you are wearing like a full-size paintball mask, you don't have to worry about cheeking down on it really, really hard against the stock just to get a sight picture. Pretty comfortable firing position. Moving down from the top, let's take a look at some of the features on the lower half of the F2000, particularly the front end, which really is kind of how the tactical Tuna got its very tactical and loving nickname. This front end can be swapped out in the real F2000 for other front end accessories like a grip with an integrated flashlight or even a quad rail setup. In fact, there were even militaries that used a grenade launcher front end for their accessory option. In fact, I think the Belgian Special Forces were the ones who used it. I'm probably wrong. If I am, make sure you let me know in the comments. One thing about changing out this front end though is because the Cybergun F2000 is standard sized, we'd be willing to bet that it would be compatible with other existing retrofits on the market. Now, there have been available options in the past for F2000s for swapping this out to one with an integrated flashlight. And because of the really convenient way to drop this front handguard simply by popping off the upper receiver and allowing that front handguard to drop free, testing and fitting those to see if they fit your platform is a really easy process. On the opposite side here, I've got the F2000 charging handle, which on the Airsoft version does absolutely nothing except look cool, much like an MP5 charging handle. It doesn't do anything, but it feels awesome to rack it, lock it in place, and then drop it when you're ready to go. I'm glad that they kept it, and I'm glad that it's functional, albeit kind of useless for Airsoft. Moving back from the charging handle, we have our trigger group and also our pistol grip, which are very much like the P90, integrated into the stock itself. One thing in particular I like about the F2000 is how much space they give you for your gloved hand. Now, I've got pretty normal size, medium to large hands, and I've got a ton of room, both around the trigger as well as in the thumb hole. So even with bulkier gloves, I'm not gonna have a problem reaching the trigger or operating the select fire switch. Now, one thing I will say about the rotary select fire switch is, to my size, I feel like the select fire switch could have been moved forward a bit. I find that I have to kind of cramp my finger back in order to select an option. I imagine that that's how the real one feels as well, and that's not a knock on this at all. It's just something to be aware of if you are similarly sized to me. One of the biggest criticisms of the P90 is the fact that in order to get any sizable magazine, you had to do an M4 magwell conversion that really converted the P90 into a drum mag. Now, the F2000 solves that issue by going directly to an M4 mag. Unfortunately, though, because of the depth in which the magazine sits inside the receiver, I don't know if you can go with a drum mag. Let's find out. I've gone ahead and grabbed a pretty generic drum mag here, and I'm going to go ahead and try it out. Not only is that a problem for fitment, but the drum mag also hits the mag release, and that's a problem. Speaking of mag releases, let's talk about the F2000's mag release. Mag release is a really conveniently placed button that would allow you, when reloading, to come up, grab the magazine and depress the mag release at the same time, and then rip the magazine out. And it's worth noting that this is different from many other rifle platforms on the market. It doesn't have a drop-free design. The real one didn't either. In fact, the real F2000 had this rubber gasket that made it really picky about magazines. So, when you're ready to change magazines, remind yourself, grip and rip, and then put in your new mag. I talk a lot about trigger feel every time we do AEG reviews. I really like snappy triggers. The F2000 is not guilty of having a snappy trigger. In fact, real shooters have described the real F2000 as having a staple gun-like trigger. There's a lot of travel, and then it finally fires. That's not necessarily a negative if that's the kind of trigger that you like. Just be aware that it will take some more travel than you might be used to on other platforms to get this to fire. Other attentions to realism, besides just the trademarks all over the receiver, are the included sling mount points up here on the front. They're metal, and they're a great way to attach one of the clip-style slings. Now, you might be tempted to throw some webbing through the slits on either side of the stock, giving you an ambidextrous way to mount a sling mount point. Although, in other examples that have existed on the market so far, I've seen these break every once in a while. So you might be better served with a more stable platform that wraps webbing completely around the stock. There are sling designs that allow for that, especially ones that were designed for like M16s, or even one designed for the P90. And because of the similar size and shape of this stock, you may find that the P90 wraparound sling mount for the rear is effective. Finally, the battery compartment. Now, under this really comfortable stock pad is your battery compartment. And because it's got a version 3 gearbox, you got plenty of room for batteries internally. One of the biggest problems with other examples on the market were that they weren't really well secured. And over time, the rubber of the stock pad would stretch out, loosen up, and you'd find your stock pad falling off on random occasion when you didn't intend it to. Thankfully, Cybergun have thought about this and put a screw to retain the stock pad. Yes, that means you have to keep an Allen with you. However, I would much rather remove it when I intended with a screw than having it fall off as I'm running in a game. We've moved over here to our Chrono setup. I've got my X-Cortec Chrono set up here with our same F2000 that we've been using for the rest of the shooting. It's important to note there really are two different versions available. In addition to black or tan, you also have two different FPS options. The one we've been using for the rest of our shooting is the 1 joule model, in which we've got the 7.4 volt LiPo, which really seems to work the best with this to avoid overcycling because of that slightly less stiff spring, as well as being more well suited to indoor and close quarters CQB play. We've got the hop-up turned off to get a more accurate reading for our FPS. Let's see how we do on the Chrono. Right around 290 FPS, which is respectable, especially for a 1 joule model. With a lot of fields starting to open up, 300 FPS limits for full autoplay and things, you're going to be well suited to those style games, especially with the longer barrel length that you get with a bullpup for its given size. Let's see what it does on full auto with a 7.4. A respectable 14 rounds per second, almost 15, 14.5. I think that's decent for a 7.4. Obviously, an 11.1 would be awesome to give you a higher rate of fire, but in order to do that, I would suggest going to a MOSFET so that you can control kind of the overspinning that you get with an 11.1 and to make it a little bit more reliable on your trigger contacts. Let's swap out for the 1.4 joule model and see what the difference is in FPS. And now we've swapped out to our 1.4 joule model, again using .20s in the high capacity magazine. We've also swapped this out for the 11.1 volt battery to give you a better idea of what the rounds per second will be with a higher voltage battery. The nice thing about the slightly stiffer spring as well is you don't get overcycling that you get with the 11.1. So if you wanted to use an 11.1, this might be the model for you. Turn the hop-up off to give you a better idea of what the hop-up will do off, and then we'll give you a comparison. Right around 380 FPS with the hop-up dialed completely off. It's important to note that by the time you get the hop-up set for a flat trajectory at farther distances, your FPS will drop just a bit. In fact, we were finding it closer to 350, 360 with the hop-up perfectly dialed in. Let's see what we got for our rate of fire. And with that 11.1 volt battery, we've got just over 21 rounds per second, which is a great place to start for a high-speed build. If you're looking for a little bit more power, a little bit farther range and stability with heavier BBs, going with the 1.4 joule model might be the one for you. Thankfully, both your power options, the 1.4 and the 1.0, come in both color options. So you've got tan or black in both. Doing our traditional 50 and 100 foot tests, I slapped a 7.4 volt LiPo in the rear, as well as 0.25 gram BBs in the magazine with the factory high cap. Grouping at the 50 foot mark was pretty good. Obviously could be improved. I would say that it was really easy to stay on target with a red dot, although I'm sure the flip up provided sights are adequate. Throwing a red dot on there really helps you track your shots and keep on target. Moving over to the 100 foot though, we start to see a much larger spread. And while a couple were still in the A zone, I was really having to correct my shots as I was firing them instead of them being really consistent. So I could see either a really good cleaning and setting of the hop-up unit, which is made easy by the flip-up cover to make quick adjustments to the hop-up unit, or even changing out to a tighter bore inner barrel and a better bucking will really bring those groupings in and give you a lot better performance at range. At about 100 feet, I would have liked to see it a little bit tighter. So based on this really rudimentary test, one might assume that because this was designed for STANAG mags, that it would work flawlessly with both polymer and metal mid-capacity magazines and high-capacity magazines as long as they were STANAG shape, but we found that not to be the case. Some of our favorite magazines here, the affordable Elite Force mid-caps, the MagMag mid-cap, the Dytac Hex Mag, even the BAMF Mag had problems with both fitment and feeding. Even some that fit pretty tightly still didn't feed very well. We found the best ones to be the Specna, a little bit tighter fit, and that's because it's more of a polymer design instead of a STANAG metal design. Similarly, we had tight fitment with the PTS, but it seemed to feed fine once you got it to fit, but it will take sending it home by tapping the base plate. In addition, we had some issues in fitment with the G&G and the Crytac mid-cap. The Crytac fitting the best of the polymer mid-cap designs, but all of them fed okay. We had the best performance out of the G&P, the G&G metal mid-cap, as well as the G&G metal high cap and the Matrix metal high cap. So if you're looking for an F2000, you're probably going to want to stick to the STANAG design, but metal, and it seems to prefer high cap magazines overall. Let's talk briefly about some of the things I really like about the F2000 and some things I don't like so much. First, I like that the ergonomics are really familiar. If you're familiar with the P90 and you're comfortable with that bullpup design, the thumb position, hand holding position, and select fire switch are going to feel right at home, and that makes it really easy to get used to if you like that bullpup style. Additionally, the bullpup style gets you a really short overall profile while giving you a lot extra barrel length, which is going to give you more accuracy and precision at range. Something else I really like about the F2000 is the ease of which it is to do upgrades and maintenance. For example, if you want to adjust your hop-up, simply lift the cover and make your adjustment. No bolt to hold open or anything to fiddle with. If you want to change your barrel, bucking, or do any maintenance on the BB leaving system, simply hit this body pin, press it to one side, and remove the whole front end. And even more so, accessing the gearbox is as easy as removing this cover and then pulling the entire version 3 compatible gearbox out the back. And I love its unique styling. However, that unique styling does come with a few drawbacks. Despite it being a bullpup design and ergonomically similar to the P90, it's a lot bulkier than the P90, and it takes a lot more of your body to wrap around it and get a good sight picture. That just takes getting used to. Additionally, because of the location of the gearbox in the back and the closeness of the stock pad, you don't have a huge battery compartment despite the overall size of the back end. And finally, as unique and cool as that progressive trigger is, it is sensitive. And if you intend to shoot semi while on the full auto setting, it will take some getting used to and practicing, because it's a very fine difference between semi and full auto while using the trigger in that way. All in all, for all of its unique looks and functionality, the F2000 presents a really unique platform that looks different than some of the standard choices we have in Airsoft. But that uniqueness doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to make upgrades and modifications to personalize this to your liking. And it being based on the version 3 system makes it ideal for anybody looking to really maximize a build with barrel length while keeping a compact platform. On top of that, it's affordable, which makes it accessible to a wide range of airsofters. And if you're looking to upgrade your airsoft arsenal with something unique and functional, you got to check out the F2000 right here on our website in both black and tan, in both out-of-the-box FPS options available. As always, make sure you're playing hard, playing safe, playing responsibly. Follow our social media, Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe if you haven't to our YouTube channel. See you guys later.